Hello, my most amazing artists. Today we're going to learn about Pablo Picasso. Pablo Picasso was born in Spain in 1881. He had trouble in school, but his father, an art teacher, didn't mind as Pablo preferred to draw instead. He moved to Paris to attend art school when he was 23. He was quite poor and painted sad scenes. This was called his blue period. Picasso experimented with his art, and along with a friend, he created cubism. Cubists painted objects from many angles and ignored round shapes and the rules of perspective. When Picasso fell in love, he painted happier events like circuses and children. This was called his rose period. He created more than 20,000 pieces of art in his lifetime and achieved much fame. Here are some examples of Picasso and his guitars, and that is going to be the inspiration for today's lesson. So notice kind of the rough shapes that the guitars have, and notice some of the more unusual, in fact, some of them are very difficult to even discern as a guitar. We're going to use this today to create some of our own art in the style of Pablo Picasso. So here we go with our materials. What you will need, some paper, some crayons or markers. I'm going to be using a black crayon or black Sharpie particularly. A lot of you have Sharpie handy, that's great. Watercolor paints and a brush if you have them. If you don't, you can always use whatever you have to create. In fact, I have some markers here to also show you what that looks like. So let's get started making our guitar art. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create some very simple shapes. So kind of lightly, we're going to think about what shapes we're going to use for our guitar. So if you're imagining the shape of a guitar, you know it's a little smaller on the top and a little bit bigger on the bottom. So before I get all the way started with my crayons, I'm just going to use a pencil to kind of create a smaller oval shape and then a larger oval shape. So they're right on top of one another, leaving space at the top for the handle of the guitar. So once you have that created, now you're going to add your black line. So you can either use a Sharpie if you have it, crayon if you have it, it really doesn't matter. So now I'm going to take with my Sharpie and kind of create the shape that goes around these shapes in making a guitar. So now you can easily remove the lines inside so that we can add some of the detail that we will want for our guitar a little bit later. So you can see the bottom of the guitar shape is formed. Now I'm getting rid of those pencil lines that I kind of used as a guide. And if they stay in, it doesn't really matter because they're going to eventually get covered up anyway. Okay, so now that I have the base of my guitar, I'm going to add some of the other features, such as that circle that we usually see inside the guitar, as well as some of the lines that create the handle of the guitar. So I'm going to come up and create that handle that usually has some of those keys on the side. Okay, so now that I have my guitar formed, I'm going to take a ruler or a straight edge. You can use paper, whatever you have, and I'm going to do something rather strange. I'm going to take and just create some very big and broad lines, not too many. Too many will make your job difficult, but you can see I'm just going to create some shapes by drawing some lines right through my picture. So I'm going to come here, slide it down all the way off my paper. Maybe one more from here to here. Okay, now that I have created shapes within my picture, I'm going to fill in with some of my materials. Now, we talked a little bit about Picasso in the blue period or the rose period. So it's up to you what color family you will decide to use. If you decide to choose the cool color or the blue period, you're going to want to use different shades of blues, maybe some greens and purples. Those are what we consider cool colors. On the rose period, you might want to use shades of red, pink, maybe some oranges or warm colors. So you can choose whichever you'd like, but once you decide, try to stick with either warm or cool. And if you're thinking to yourself, what is it? Double check and think to yourself, if it's cool like water, cool colors. If it's warm like the sun, like red and orange and pinks, those are warm colors. Okay, you can also use your paints for this as well. So if you have access to some, this might help you fill in your spaces quicker. So you'll notice now I'm just going to start choosing some shades and I'm just going to fill in the shape. Every time there's a black line, I will have to change the tone or the tint of my color. So this is a blue. This can be blue, but this time it might have to be a much darker blue or maybe a blue-green. That's also a cool color. So even though it's not exactly the same, it's in the family of blues. It has some blue in it. It's just a different shade of blue. You can even mix your own colors, which will give you infinite choices to paint all of your squares. If you're using markers, you simply color in each shape in each section. Each time there's a black line, even something as small as this, you want to change to a different shade. So it's a darker blue. You can see the difference between those two. You don't want to put the same color next to each other because then they will just all kind of blend into one big color, big shape. You want each shape to be very distinct in its color. So even if you're mixing colors or if you're coloring or painting, you want to definitely use some different, you can add some white to see what colors you can create. You can add some little tiny touch of black to see what colors you create. And you can create all sorts of tints and shades. So you can simply mix the paints right on your paper if you're brave, or you can also use a plastic lid to go ahead and mix some of your paint. So I'll show you how that looks. So I have my blue and then I'm going to add just a tiny bit. You don't want to add too much and have it dominate your picture. Just a tiny bit of black, and you can see how it kind of makes the blue turn into like a grayish blue. So that will give it a different look. So I'm going to mix that in really well. Now it's kind of a slate blue, as they'll call it. Nice dark color. So you can see how using your materials in different ways, don't be afraid to experiment and try something new. It might lead you into a great discovery. You can also wet your markers with water, and that will kind of give it a more painterly effect. But once you're finished, you'll see you'll have an amazing Picasso guitar. I hope you enjoy creating today, friends. I can't wait to see what you're going to make.